Hello, everyone. This is Henry Schneider with the Business Performance Podcast, and today it's my pleasure to talk with David Norton, who's the new Executive Director for the Consortium for Information and Software Quality. And he just recently wrote an article called The Price of Misplaced Trust in Your Digital Ecosystem, which is a pretty interesting read. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you for having me, and it's my pleasure to be here today.
So I guess the best way to do this, kind of, for people who don't know about the consortium, could you briefly describe what the consortium does, who are the members, and what services you provide?
So the consortium had an existence for nearly 10 years, and it was set up with the OMG and the SEI. Bill Curtis, who many of you will know from CMM, was one of the major driving forces behind the consortium. And the consortium remit is really around software quality and associated standards. And we look at software standards in terms of reliability, maintainability, effectiveness, and also standards related to security and vulnerabilities as well.
Okay. So what are one or two of the biggest myths or misconceptions out there when it comes to considering software quality?
Well, I think one of the key things is it's always comes second. The whole phrase non-functional requirements makes software quality in the back seat. It's not often on the backlog of a new system. So I think for me, the frustration is software quality is often seen secondary. We still live in a world where software quality is something that people try to put in at the end. Now, things like test-driven development and BDD have improved things significantly, but still, if you look at maintainability, if you look at operational effectiveness, those things that impact total cost of ownership, they are still often not thought about until a system goes live. And that's why increasingly systems are costing 4 to 7 times more operationally than we actually planned for.
Interesting. So given all of that, what's the number one biggest challenge that companies face with quality, but more important, performance of their business?
Well, I think getting the business to understand that software quality has an intimate relationship with the business capabilities, and getting people to understand from an operational perspective is, yes, we could talk about business process management, we could talk about the business capabilities, but increasingly in a digital world, they are underpinned by systems. So if you look, I'll give one example, if you look at a new process for car insurance now, how we monitor those drivers is part of a cyber physical system. If the software quality is not in those IoT devices, then it will not be in your capability and your business processes. Doesn't matter how much time you spend on those. You can't build that in if it's not there in the fundamental systems. So I think the challenge is for the CIOs and the product management functions now to get the business to really understand that this is an issue that is front and center in terms of their business process and their capabilities.
Okay. So how do you get the attention of the CIOs that they need to pay attention to? Because a lot of them are, they're young guys who have been growing up, entrepreneurs, startups, and they've got that title, and they really don't care about this. They're more concerned about getting the thing out to market.
So this is one of the big challenges. And if we actually go back to some basic fundamentals, we talk about minimum viable product. Mm-hmm. So all the companies I talk to, they say, yes, we're focused on Agile and DevOps and developing MVPs. But there was something behind that they missed, the minimum marketable product. An MVP was a learning tool, technically, from a business perspective. It would always have a lot of technical debt. And that was okay as long as we remembered that we had to develop the minimum marketable product, polish it up, get the quality there, will it scale, easy to maintain. That has been lost. So for every person who talks to me about an MVP, there might be 1 in 100 who says, oh, and don't forget, we will polish it up to make the MMP. So I think for the generation that are coming into IT now, we have to start an education exercise, really, to think about the longer term cost, the total cost of ownership. If you think that the ratio in terms of CapEx and OpEx is somewhere, well, in most organizations, your systems will either be 8 to 16% on your CapEx, the rest is OpEx. So what do? Well, we need to get the CIOs incentivized on their KPIs, on their dashboards, the longer term risks and longer term costs of the systems they're bringing into the organization. Whilst they are incentivized purely by innovation, well, we shouldn't be surprised that they are just going to focus on the MVPs. They are going to be knocking them out because that's what the business wants. Until the day comes that the CFO and the CEO says, yes, we want those MVPs, but we also want a lower cost of ownership. Until that happens, we are still going to be facing the same problem.
Yeah, it all comes down to getting the right measures, because they're still focused on what Eric Ries calls vanity metrics, and you look good on the books, but the customer base is not there.
That's right. That's right. And I think so. We've got to dig a little bit deeper behind those metrics. I think we've got to associate software quality and risk with business risk now. So if every business is a digital business, then surely every IT risk is a business risk as well. We can't have one without the other. And I think we've got to educate people on that, to understand what that sound bite really means, which is they have to engage with the CIO, have to engage with engineering and with their SIs, and have a more pragmatic approach to software quality.
So how do you get them to open their eyes and realize they need to pay attention here? I mean, they're going, they're running as fast as they can, throwing this stuff together, but they're still not paying attention. So how do you bust through that to wake them up?
Well, I personally don't like using fear, uncertainty, or doubt. I've never liked that when it was being used to sell stuff to me, and I don't like the idea when I was an analyst using that, or now I'm, the executive director for CISC. But if we step back and look at the number of outages, if we look at the number of financial fines and the size of those financial fines, the evidence is pretty clear that there is a crisis. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to be honest and say we can't ignore this. All indicators are that we're heading to more outages, greater vulnerabilities, higher technical debt, and greater costs. So that's a negative sell. I don't personally like that. So there's also a positive sell as well. If you really want to innovate, it's easier to innovate in systems that have that quality built in. You can extend them. They have a longer life. They have greater utilization. So if you're looking at your API strategy, your cloud strategy, your digital strategy, if you build that quality in, you have greater innovation opportunities. So that's more of a positive message. I think we need both because I personally feel that the positive message some will listen to, but human nature more will listen to more of the FUD message.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they don't pay attention until all of a sudden they're in trouble and they go, "Whoops, you're good." Or they take what they learned and they go to a new company and say, "Okay, here's all the bad stuff that happened before. Let's be a little more visionary and be positive moving forward."
That's right. That's right. So it's unfortunate that is human nature.
Okay, so can you share a story with our viewership about what was an epiphany or a defining moment for you to move you into this new position as the executive director?
Well, I'm going to share two, if I may.
Sure.
First goes back to the first Gulf War. So I volunteered to be involved with control systems and chemical warfare systems during the first Gulf War. And I had a concern now that I was at the pointy end about these systems. And that concern was the quality wasn't there and the engineering process were not there. So this is 20 odd years ago. And that concern has always stayed with me, that as an engineer, I always had a duty, and ethically I had a duty to think about the operational aspects of that system because I was dealing with the warfighter. But something much more up to date is the reason why I took the role was actually my children. I explained to my children that the role what CISC is about and what the role would be in terms of software quality and its importance. And I used a real example. Every day or every 2 days, we have to restart the router because it's got a memory leak. And I explained that's a software quality issue. And the comment my youngest child said was, Daddy, as an analyst, what you do is quite cool. You go to conferences and you write paper. I hasten to add, doesn't make me cool. They made that very clear, but what I do is quite cool. But then they paused and said, what you could do within the consortium and collectively is even cooler because it's more important, because what if it's not a router? What if it's an intensive care system, a car automotive system, an aircraft? And I was really pleased that an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old could see the importance of the work that CIS does and software quality generally. So there's hope. There's hope that if we can get a new generation of engineers to early, then I think we can do great things. And that's the reason why I took the role.
Oh, wonderful. So now thinking about that, how would you distill that down into a moral for your story?
Well, I think the moral of the story is, as an engineer, you have to do the right thing. And there are some examples in the press at the moment where engineers haven't done the right thing. So I think the ethics of being an engineer mean you have to occasionally step back and say, am I doing the right thing for the end user and customer? And that includes not just the functions and requirements, but it also includes those software quality performance issues. So for me, the moral is the ethics side of engineering. You can never, ever forget that you're building a system that impacts society, impacts the individual. And that means you must never, ever forget quality.
Yeah. Quality is just paramount. And you got that triangle too: people, process, and technology, trying to balance quality in the middle there.
That's right. And the sad thing is, quite often when people draw that triangle, is what do they forget? To put quality in the middle of that triangle. So I think for me, it's about having the engineering discipline and practices and ethos that's part of your psyche. That's part of your makeup as an engineer.
So now you were talking about some successes. So if you go back to pre-consortium days to Gartner, you were talking about working with a big financial firm in the UK. What type of success did you see to help move them forward?
So I can't name the company, but they're a global financial company, but they actually typify a problem within this space. They had moved towards a more agile DevOps approach. They had changed their operating models to have greater autonomy. They were focused on product and platforms, and they were using, kind of a mixture of a squad model. So you had hundreds of autonomous delivery units being rolled up into tribes. The problem was there was varying degrees of maturity within those units, and the company was seeing that in terms of quality, outages, issues of integration. So the success we had was being able to work with the CIO and the transformation team to get them to understand that autonomy cannot just be given away; it has to be earned. So how did the product units earn that autonomy? So we wanted to make it very practical. We wanted to make it consistent. We wanted to make it transparent. So if a team manages technical debt, if it had a fully integrated tool chain, if it managed its vulnerabilities, then they were given greater leeway. For example, they had full control over their containers and VM. They could release anytime they wanted to. They didn't have to freeze. They could do true CI/CD. From a change board perspective, they could go back to the change board and say, this is what we've done. They didn't have to ask for permission. But if a team had low tool integration, was struggling with its vulnerabilities, was struggling to manage technical debt, then there were greater checks and balances. So that gamified things as well, because nobody wanted to be in those low-level teams. A nice side effect was the mature teams would help out those teams that had a lower level of maturity. It was difficult. They had to step back 2 years and take back some of the autonomy that some teams were given. But I'm pleased to say that's worked very, very well. And another one, quite quickly, is within CISC. It's helping an organization use on the user standards for sizing on productivity on a large outsourcing contract in the media industry, where they've been able to look at using our standards to improve the way they work with their SIs.
Okay, very good. So one question that I'm thinking about is, I know that the CMM and the CMMI used to be a big deal in Europe, but over the years it's kind of squashed down with not much movement. So, but how is it that you're able to continue with the software quality without using those other process improvement models?
Well, I think it's important to recognize a distinct from what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use, for example, the CIS standard for reliability or operational efficiency in the context of CMMI, or outside of that, you can use it standalone. And in fact, many organizations do use it standalone. So it's important to say they're not intimately coupled. You know, if you wanted, for example, the Scaled Agile framework, SAFe, if you wanted to adopt SAFe and say that within of the Agile release trains, they were to be using CIS standards and CIS tools that support CIS standards, you could do that, and you wouldn't be using CMI.
Okay. All right. So that's the beauty of it then, is that you can use certain pieces of it without having to worry about appraisals and all this other wraparound stuff.
Absolutely. And I would say the vast majority of our users actually don't have any formal appraisals. Although I would say I think that's going to change. I think within defense, automotive, finance, because of the outages, because of the greater risk, I think we might see greater regulation and greater desires for certification services over the next 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. So can you share any type of measurable outcomes or things that you see, like an increase in X number of percentage in productivity, or decreasing in or increasing quality, or something like that?
So I think one of the key ones is total cost of ownership. So a system that is delivered with low levels of technical debt, that is delivered with metrics that are and standards that are thinking about reliability and maintainability, that can cost you 4 to 7 times less than a comparable system that hasn't thought about those metrics and those issues. So from a total cost of ownership perspective, I think there are great savings there. The other saving or improvement is around productivity. So I'll give you one personal one. Working with an organization some years ago, and the productivity was not great. By using an automated approach to measuring productivity, we saved $110 million with one SI. Now, was that by increasing their productivity? It was actually by benchmarking and having a consistent approach around the use of function points. Now, with the CIS standards, that can be automated. So by using automated function points, or the new ISO standard based on that, or enhancing function points, you can improve the way you measure productivity, and you can also then agree productivity increases in a fair way with your SIs.
Well, okay, so that makes me think about, how does AI and machine learning factor into this now?
So this is a really interesting one, because there's a whole concern around quality around AI machine learning. So there are organizations looking at the quality of the algorithms, but we're very interested in the quality of the code and the underlying data that those algorithms use. So if an algorithm is mission critical and is vulnerable to code weaknesses, then that algorithm could be gamed. So we're very interested in the consortium and how our standards can be applied to AI and algorithms. We're also working on a new piece of work that I'm pleased to announce, which is around model-based systems engineering. Now, for many, model-based systems engineering is associated with aerospace and automotive, but increasingly, it's being used with things like digital twins and cyber physical. And increasingly, it's being used with AI. So, for example, people are using AI with those models to understand threats and vulnerabilities. Now at CISC, we have a new initiative which is looking at the quality of those models. The higher the quality, the better fidelity of those models, the more effective those AI and algorithms can be applied. to those models. So it's a very interesting area that we have been looking. We started to look at amongst the consortium because it's an area that's raised a lot of concerns in the last 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the RPAs are like the hot topic now, and some of that stuff's like freeware, others are custom built. And I would think that the quality is all over the map when you've got.
It is, and I think there is a danger that the quality varies considerably, and then I think that leaves organisations vulnerable. And I think the other thing with RPA is there's a kind of a mindset of we've bought RPA from vendor X, so security vulnerabilities is their problem. Well, no, because this is the mindset of the cloud. Yes, you might be using RPA on-prem or cloud-based, but if that solution can be gamed, if that solution is vulnerable, it's your business processes, it's your customers.
Yeah.
So simply saying, well, it's not our problem now because we're using a third-party package to do RPA is not good enough. It's back to our old friend. IT risk is business risk, whether you built the system or you're using a third-party system or RPA.
Yeah, and it ends up going to be a bunch of finger pointing. It's not my job, it's not you. And it's all those interfaces are where you got the vulnerabilities.
Exactly, and this is why I think we will see greater regulation in this space in the future, because I think the consumer has had enough of that finger pointing. Mm-hmm. It's no good when you ring up your bank and say, hey, why have I been paid? If somebody says, well, it's the RPA process, let us down. Mm-hmm. I don't care. So I think this is where the CIO is having to start to wake up and realize that the chief compliance officer doesn't want to hear it's our RPA vendor. I don't want to know about that. It was your job to make sure that that package is performant and not vulnerable, regardless of where it came from.
Yeah. So what's the most important thing companies should be thinking about when they come to CISC for advice?
Understanding that CISC is about standards. So we can help people implement those standards. We can help them identify which tools implement those standards. We can help them understand how those standards can be implemented by the teams. But the standards need to be part of a wider story, and that wider story is recognizing the standards that CISC develop are related to quality, vulnerabilities, they're related to IT, and then hence business risk. So the effort to implement those standards has to come from somewhere. There needs money to be involved in that. There needs time. You won't get that time unless the business sees this is important. So one of the things that we do a lot of at the moment is education within this sphere of how people can take something like standards, which, let's face it, if you talk to people at standards, if you say you're involved at standards at a party, I guarantee people will walk away and go to the go wine and cheese. But to take that into what my boys saw, why is it important? Because without that standard, your router doesn't work, your lights don't go on, your car doesn't start. So we have to turn something that might feel quite mundane into something that's more business capability aligned, something that's more important for the business in terms of risk and performance.
Okay. So what's some type of advice that you usually give to people in terms of quality and performance?
Don't sell on the general case. So I think that's important. If you say to somebody, hey, we need to be involved with CISC or we need to be involved with software quality, they're going to go, oh, here he goes again. So don't sell on the general case, sell on a specific case. Hey, Mr. Business, do you know that new payment system you want to roll out in Asia? Do you realize if the latency is too high, we're going to lose a third of transactions? Oh, now you've got my interest. So what do I do? Well, we need to make sure that the software quality is built in with the SI. So we want to make sure the SI is using a particular standard, hopefully CISC standards, to make sure that software quality is built in. So when it comes to any standard, you have to think about specific capabilities and opportunities. The other thing that we have to recognize is we're now living in a world of agile and DevOps and cyber physical, all those lovely sound bites. And the days of a centralized function that can say, thou shalt follow this standard are gone. So if we convince somebody in an organization that they should be using a software standard in terms of vulnerability and quality, the job's not done, because they may have to convince 600 autonomous scrums or squads to start following those standards as well. So the other important takeaway, I think, is realizing that you've got to do a hearts and minds within the enterprise to win people over at the team squad level in terms of software quality and managing technical debt.
Yeah. And I guess the other question is, what's missing is like a chief engineer. They used to have somebody that understood the whole product architecture, but now it's so complex. How do you address that issue?
Well, this is the thing. We're living, in a world of systems of systems, and I think that's really important that we recognize that. And from a governance perspective, we have to understand that if you think about system governance, there are kind of 4 levels. There's directed, I will tell you. Now, that's gone in most organizations. That level of control is history. So now we get into collaborative. Well, collaborative is we'll all work together and we'll see what happens. Well, that's leading to high levels of architectural debt and greater outages. Then there's virtual. We don't even know we're involved, and that's a digital economy. We may not even know that we are part of a wider trust network until we have an outage. But there's one I haven't mentioned, and that's acknowledged. That is, we are autonomous, but we acknowledge there is a greater outcome the enterprise is trying to work to. Once you get to acknowledge systems to systems governance, you can start to think about, well, what do we acknowledge? We acknowledge we will work to agreed standards within each of those autonomous units. So we don't need the command and control directed. We don't even know when we're living in the virtual one. The collaborative one, which many organizations are talking about now, is failing. So we have to go back to that acknowledged one. And that might mean there is a senior systems engineer whose job it is to work with those autonomous units to make sure that those standards are being used.
Okay. All right. So another topic here is that your recent article about the price of misplaced trust in your digital ecosystem. Would you kind of summarize that for the viewers?
So we are in this system of systems world. We are in this world where there are connectivity from our business systems, our social systems, and there is a trust network. But I think what's important is we've got to trust but verify. Too many organizations are taking it on faith that their partners, their packages, have undertaken due diligence. And that's a huge assumption, because in many cases it's wrong. If I go back to the catalyst for my interest in quality, the first Gulf War, I was amazed at how many systems did not integrate the way we expected them to do. For many, many years, we trusted they would, but when it came to push come to shove, they failed. We're in that same situation. So for me, the takeaway is, yes, you trust, but you need to verify that. And that verification could be simply, what standards are you working to in terms of software quality and vulnerabilities? Or it might be more complex, where you might feel that player, that partner is so critical to your ecosystem, you might actually have to do an audit of that partner to make sure that standards are there.
Well, great. We're going to keep talking forever and ever on this, but we're running out of time. So how can people contact you to learn more about SIS and software quality?
So we are a non-profit organization. They can come to the SIS site and they can contact us there. There are the standards they can download. They can contact us direct. We love to chat to people. We don't charge for that. We're not consultants, but if people want to speak to us around how they can use our standards, or actually help us develop the standards, because there's a lot of new standards coming through at the moment, go to the SIS site, see the contact details, click the button, and we can have a chat.
Okay, so can you spell out the URL for us?
So the URL is simply www.it-cisq.org.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So, Dave, you're a fantastic storyteller. I really enjoy all your advice about productivity and increasing, dealing with the technical debt, etc. So, I'm sure our viewers will find this just as fascinating as I did. So, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having us, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so that was great. Now I'd just like to do a couple of things here to wrap up the podcast. So first, I want to talk to you about what we're going to do. So I like to market my podcast. We have a marketing strategy. So over the next 90 days, we're going to keep pushing it out to different people. First, it's going to be on YouTube, and then the audio will be on a whole variety of platforms like iHeartRadio and iTunes, and Google Play, etc.
Okay.
And so once it's published, I will send you an email with all of the links, and so you can take that and blast it out to your network.
Brilliant. And I will blog it as well. So that'd be really cool. Okay.
And then secondly, I'd like to get a video testimonial from great guests such as yourself. So is it okay if I ask you to do that?
Yeah, sure. No troubles at all.
Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is I'll tee this up, and you're going to be talking to future podcast participants. You won't be talking to me. So I'm actually going to kind of back off into the background.
Yep. Okay.
So what I'll ask you to do is just say two things. My name, Henry Schneider, and the Business Performance Podcast.
Okay.
All right, so let me tee this up for you. So, hey, Dave, how do you enjoy working with Henry Schneider today in the Business Performance Podcast?
So working with Henry Schneider in the Business Performance Podcast, I admit I'm always nervous about these sorts of things, but it's been really easy. Henry's obviously done this a lot. He's really nailed the process, made it really pleasurable. I think this is the easiest one I've ever done.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was wonderful. So once again, thank you so much for your time today, especially since it's late at night for you there.
That's okay.
And
okay.
Again, your advice is spot on. Do you have any questions for me before you?
No. And out of interest, I'm actually on a boat, so I don't know if you can add that in. But I'm coming live from a barge on the Thames.
I was wondering about that. It looks like a long, narrow room.
It's a barge. Yeah, it's a barge on the Thames.
That's pretty cool. So, by the way, if you've got anybody else that you would think would be a great guest, you could please send them my way, and we'll put them in.
Yeah, more than happy to do that. That'd be my pleasure. All right. Thanks very much, Henry. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.